Good evening, everybody. My name's Sue Smith. I'm the membership trustee for the Gloucester Civic Trust. And I'd just like to say welcome to you all this evening. Thank you very much indeed for coming. And I hope you've enjoyed the series so far of the Zoom meetings we've had. And this evening, I'm going to introduce Claire Dovey-Evans to you, who's going to talk all about the Westgate Street project. Now, Claire is actually employed by the City Council, and she's been working on this project since May 2020. But previously, she managed the Heritage Lottery funded grant for Southgate Street. And so she was working on that for about 5 years. So she's very experienced and obviously knows quite a lot about Gloucester by now. Having said that, Claire, I think you've been commuting from Abergavenny, which is actually where you live. That's right, isn't it? Yeah.
That's right, Sue, yeah.
Good, good. And apparently it takes her over an hour to get here. So she obviously loves her job. But at the moment, she can't do that. Like everybody, she's in lockdown and not able to travel. So Claire has a museum's background, but is very qualified in heritage management and historical buildings conservation. So she's got a really fantastic background for doing the job that she's got, which is actually the project manager. She's going to be busy this evening presenting about the Cathedral Quarter heritage-led regeneration scheme. I think it's a big title. So well, without further ado, I shall say thank you very much indeed for coming, Claire, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. I'll start to share my screen. I hope you can all see that.
Yes, looks good.
Yes, that's fine.
I'm just trying to lose the bar at the top so that I can actually start. There we go. Okay, get the first slide up. So yeah, thank you very much for the introduction, Sue. I'm going to be talking to you all tonight about the Cathedral Quarter project in Gloucester, which is very exciting. It's come at a particularly difficult time, as you're all aware. We were successful with the money, and as Sue said, I've been working on this since May, but obviously COVID hit just before we started work on this, and it's sort of delayed things quite considerably and altered how we've had to work with it, as lots of other people too. But we have made some progress, and I'll be really happy to share this with you, as the Civic Trust is one of our key partners actually in this project. It's a City Council project, but very much run through a partnership. So I'll take you back to the beginning and talk to you about how and why we managed to get this funding. And as Sue said, if you've got questions, please do put them in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer as many of them as I can at the end for you. So, can't move my slides on. There we go. So we're talking about the our successful bid to the Historic England Heritage Action Zone pot of money. So this is a programme is a place-based scheme designed to see improvements to our historic high streets and the communities that use them. So Historic England have been running this for several years, and the City Council has actually applied a couple of times previously for Heritage Action Zone funding, and were unsuccessful. So this is our third attempt, and on this occasion, Historic England had altered their criteria slightly, and rather than just a Heritage Action Zone, which is a mouthful in itself, they decided to add the words High Street in front and make it all about the High Street. As you're probably aware, before COVID even hit, retail on the high streets was on the decline. High streets were suffering very much through that. And this was seen as a way of perhaps helping high streets, putting them back into the forefront of people's minds, if you like, in a different way, and really capitalising on the heritage that's in many, many high streets up and down the country. So this is a £95 million government funded programme, and it's basically all about, as I say, putting new life back into these high streets. We've been successful, but there are many others up and down the country. It's £40 million from the Department of Digital Culture, Media and Sport, and £52 million from the Ministry. Sorry, I can't read that because everybody's pictures are over the top of it. the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government's Future High Street Fund. And then there's a separate little strand of this project, which is funded through the National Lottery Heritage Fund, £3 million to support a cultural programme. And I'll be talking a bit more about that as we go on. So what's this all about then? So it's basically about changing people's perceptions of heritage in the high street. A lot of people don't realise that heritage exists on the high street. They walk up and down, they do their shopping, they visit their dentist, they go to their doctors, whatever it might be on the high street, and don't necessarily realise how historic they are. Particularly in Gloucester, I think you guys probably do realise how historic they are. Being involved in the Civic Trust, I would hope you do, but lots of people don't. And so this is all about really singing about the heritage that's on our high streets, bringing it to the fore, and really making the best use of it. So the funding there is to do physical works to buildings, to repair, reinstate lost architectural features, and converting the buildings for new uses, including residential. So we're feeling that obviously retail is declining. COVID has really sort of helped to put the nail in the coffin for that. And it's looking at our historic buildings and seeing on the high street and seeing what else they can be used for. So looking at alternative uses for buildings. And that is mainly going to be residential, potentially office and other types of use, but we're looking at quite a lot of converting of upper floors for residential use. It will improve the appearance of shared spaces and the public realm. And as I said, we're creating cultural opportunities through learning about the history of the high street and its importance to those communities. So this is going to be a 4-year partnership. We were successful with the funding in April, and it will run for 4 years until April 2024. We are really hoping that Historic England will allow us to extend it by another year, given the COVID situation, and that really we haven't been able to kick off as we would have liked to with this project, but that's to be seen. We were told we need to work closely with other high street stakeholders, including the local community, and we would have to find funding for 50% of the cost. So whilst we're getting quite a lot of money from Historic England, £1.9 million, we're having to find 50% to match that with. Not all cash, some of it can be in kind, and our partners are very much helping us with some of the in-kind contributions that we need to make that 50% match funding up. The scheme has to involve a conservation area, and we had to demonstrate that in Gloucester we had a need for this project. So here's what we had to look at to put our application together, and this is the deprivation index, and it shows that the Westgate area of the city is in the top 10% of deprived areas in the country for a number of issues, so employment, health deprivation, disability, national rank, crime and disorder, and the living environment. So we could prove that being in that top 10% of deprivation, that the Westgate ward would be eligible for the funding. We also had to look at our community wellbeing index. I don't know if people are aware of this, but it's something that you can look up for your postcode, and you can see how you compare against other areas in the country, various types of community wellbeing aspects. And you can see that we don't do too badly. The national average score is 52, and in Westgate we're scoring 55. But there are, on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see there we're below the average on a number of areas: relationships and trust, equality, voice and participation. Whilst we do quite well in terms of culture, heritage and leisure, connectivity, and that kind of thing, there are areas where we score quite highly on this community wellbeing index as well. So those are the kinds of issues we're going to be looking to try and address with the project. So further demonstrations of need, we looked at the vacancy rates, which when we came to put the application together back in 2019, average vacancy rates on Westgate Street were at 26%, which is very high, and definitely very high, over double the national average at the time in 2019, which was at 11%. That's probably altered since COVID as well, and the national average will definitely have gone up since then. Unfortunately, I can't tell you what the current figures are. There might be people in the room who can, but we also looked at property prices. So the average value of a property in the GL1 area for Westgate was slightly lower than the average. That was something we looked at. The number of buildings on the national and local at-risk register was something we also looked at. It is a very historic area. There are 79 listed buildings within the Westgate Cathedral Quarter zone, and 6 of those are on the at-risk register. We did some consultation with businesses in partnership with the bid, the local bid, just before putting the application in, and we took the feedback from them into the application. And some of the issues that came out of that are obviously the decline in retail, the increase in vacancy, the need for activities, education and training for young people in the area. There's a lot of perceived difficulties going through the planning process. People applying for planning and listed building consent, and it's a very difficult process. People felt that historic buildings were not being looked after properly in the area, and that work that was being done wasn't sympathetic or in keeping with those historic buildings. And in terms of the public realm, the street scene itself, it wasn't seen as being majorly attractive. It wasn't somewhere where people would like to dwell. There wasn't enough seating. It wasn't somewhere you would sit and have a sandwich, that kind of thing. So we, as I said, we're one of 68 high street heritage action zones in the country. We're in the southwest region, along with several others. So in the southwest region, there's also Chard, Colompton, Keynsham, Midsummer Norton, Plymouth, Poole, Redruth, Preston-super-Mare, and our nearest neighbour is Tewkesbury. We hope to be working with Tewkesbury very closely in some of the activities that we're going to be doing. And I've just heard from the chap from Colompton today who's running the scheme down there. So we will be comparing notes and taking sort of solace in each other's situations, if you see what I mean. At the moment, during COVID, we're not being able to do as much as we would like. But where we are making progress, we'd certainly like to share our expertise and our experience and make the best of the fact that we are one of many doing this kind of project. So to get to the nitty gritty, our Cathedral Quarter area is the area marked in red, as you can see on this map here. So we're in the city centre conservation area, and we're going from the cross, which is down on the sort of bottom right-hand corner, along Westgate Street, right down to as far as the Great George Public House on the corner, and as far as St Nicholas Church. So quite a large area, and it also covers the lanes and links off Westgate Street. So quite a large area, and as I say, 79 listed buildings in that area and 6 on our at-risk register. So quite a lot of work to be done, quite a lot of properties that we can work with. So as I said, it's delivered through a partnership, very much a partnership approach, and we want really to engage the partners as much as possible. It hasn't been possible to do as much as we would like in the first year, but this talk to yourselves is a great step forward for us. One of our key partners, as I say, represented on the steering group. You can see the target sort of little diagram on the right there shows how we are set up. So we have a very broad range of stakeholders, all kinds of people from bridge training, treasure seekers, Young Gloucestershire, all sorts of people that we are hoping and will be engaging with over the project. And then we will have people who are in the Hussars Partnership, and then those will be represented by someone from those organisations on our steering group. And both the Civic Trust and Gloucester Historic Buildings are represented on the steering group. You can see there our list of partners is quite comprehensive, but it's not all encompassing. As I say, that the wider stakeholders are much, much bigger and wider. So this is what Historic England put in their guidance. There's 3 strands to this programme. We need to do the physical interventions, the cultural programme, and we also need to engage the community. So what are we proposing to do then in Gloucester with this funding that we have? So the first thing we're going to look at, the first strand of those 3, is the building improvements, the physical interventions, sorry, which includes building improvements and the street scene, but we'll look at buildings first. So we'll be offering a grant scheme, very similar to what I used to work on in Southgate Street. So this will be looking at restoring authentic architectural features and materials to the frontages of historic buildings, and also bringing those vacant floor spaces back into beneficial use, including the conversion of upper floors. So it's not about routine maintenance, although there will be, as part of the first strand, something where people will be able to improve their shop fronts and windows and make small adjustments to buildings to make them more attractive. But essentially what we're trying to do, it's all about regenerating the high street. It's all about bringing more people back into the city centre to either live or work effectively, and bringing a bit more life back into the city through making the most of those buildings and getting them back into use, beneficial use, which is the best thing for them. As you know, a building is empty, or if the upper floors are vacant, quite often the the owners are not really too fussed about what condition it's in, as long as they're getting their rental income in from their shop. But that does quite often mean that the upper floors are neglected, the roofs are leaking, problems stack up. But if you've got people living in those upper floors, that's no longer going to be the case. So that's what we're aiming for, to get much better use and much better care of those historic buildings along, within the zone. So these are our target buildings. What we've done is we've identified some priorities for assistance based on how historically important they are, how significant they are, their interest to people, their current conditions. So if they're in a really poor condition, or if they're on our at-risk register, they'll be up there as a significant priority, and their potential for positive impact on the conservation area. So you can see the buildings are all in different colours. Essentially, the ones in green are our sort of strong priorities. The ones in orange are sort of target buildings that we're going to be working towards, and the ones in yellow are ones that we've identified that work needs to be done. That's not to say that the other buildings in the zone aren't eligible. It's just that we've particularly sort of singled these out, having looked at the buildings and having been around as many of them as we possibly could. We've worked out that these are the ones that are sort of in key need of some updating in terms of their fabric and in terms of those criteria that I've just mentioned. So to look at the ones we're working on at the moment, or sort of attempting to work on at the moment, given the situation, 39 and 41 Westgate Street, you may have seen that there is scaffolding around these buildings at the moment, and things are actually happening here. The owner of the former headmaster, well, I think it's still headmasters, Barbers, but former Inti building, is working with us. They've appointed an architect. We've sort of lumped these two together because they are so close together, and actually the timber framing that is actually behind them, they are quite early buildings actually, which you might not realise when you look at them, goes across both buildings. So we've felt that it would be better for the two buildings to be worked on by one architect who can sort of look at them as a pair and look at how they work structurally together. And I've got a photograph of this jettied area that's currently covered in scaffolding, but that juts out over Bull Lane. You've probably realised that that's actually quite a bit older than it looks. The front of the building looks very Georgian. The side of the building has a jetty, so that's quite, what's going on there? We're quite interested in that. And we found, when we removed the plaster work, that there's actually some timber framing left underneath there. So the building is, as I say, looks Georgian from the front. So obviously, if I skip back a slide, you can see that it would have originally been the same as number 41 next door. That's the original height of the roof that would have been there. And it's been Boris Johnson's, go up, build up. Somebody did that back in the Georgian era and put an extra floor on that building. So it would have been very similar to 41, but now it has an extra story. That timber framing that would have been there originally is still there in quite good condition. So we're hoping that we can retain that, do some work to preserve it, and then get it back on display on Bull Lane, which will be fab. Next door, number 41, the fixed phone shop that used to be, is in really poor condition, very, very poor condition. But has, if you go up in the roof, there's interesting roof structures, and is a very, very early building alongside number 39. So we're working again with the owner there. They're very keen to work with us and have the same architect employed to sort of look at plans and proposals for the building. This next slide is interesting. This is actually a digital scan that's been done of the two buildings. So if anyone's interested, I can send you a link to this, and you can go to the website. It's a company called Aerial Cam, and he's come along and done these digital surveys, and you can, when you go on this website, you can flick around with this building and move it around. It's like a 3D sort of model, if you like. So if you look very closely at the bottom right hand side, you can see the chimney is actually empty. That's because they didn't survey that side of the chimney. And down at the bottom, you can just see inside the building there, which is actually part of the Sword Inn, but they didn't scan that building either. But it shows the poor condition of the buildings. You can see that that upper story that was added was a bit jerry-built. The render on it is coming off. It's really in poor condition, and we have actually managed to get in just before something awful happened here, and we would lose them. We would have lost them forever. But these are very significant in terms of the need and potentially the significance, because we've found some interesting things when we've gone into these buildings. So many of you may know the Gloucestershire Historic Building Recording Group, and you might know that Andy Moir is doing some dendrochronology, looking at the timber dating in both here and in around Tewkesbury, I believe, at the same time. So anyway, he's come into the two buildings and he's managed to get some core samples from some of the timbers there. And you can see the date ranges that have come back are somewhere between 1568 and 1589 for number 39, and 1545 and 1577 for number 41. This is hot off the press. I don't think Andy Moir has published this report yet, so you're very lucky to get this in the early stages of knowledge. You're some of the first people to know this. So we're very excited about this. They do show that the buildings are quite early, and possibly, as we had sort of assumed, that they were built at the same time, and they are contemporary and potentially could have been built as one structure. We've also found some early wallpapers. So this picture isn't amazing, it's not brilliant, but you can see there that there are lots of layers of wallpaper. Number 41 had been covered over with modern plasterboard and skin. And when that was removed, to have a look at the timber framing and to see the condition of the timber framing, that's what's found underneath all these early wallpapers. So there are a few samples here, and I thought it might be quite fun to ask you if you can work out, looking at these, which ones. Some of you might hate this. We did this in our team meeting, and some of my colleagues were bored stiff. So I do apologise if wallpapers are not your thing, but I'm really quite excited by these. They're quite interesting. So looking at these, which would you say are the earlier wallpapers? There's two in the left-hand picture. There's two wallpapers, one on top of the other. There's one wallpaper in the middle with the blue colour, and then there's one at the end, which is sort of got birds and leaves in it. So have a little think, and then I shall reveal the answers. My initial thought was the blue one in the middle was the oldest one, but actually, so in the first picture on the left, we've got the two layers there. So the first layer there is a late 18th, early 19th century, difficult to see in this picture. It's got the slightly darker green and brown elements in it to the far left of the picture. That's the earliest wallpaper, quite a rare one and quite an interesting one. And the second layer is that simple geometric design, the cream with the green stars and so on. That dates from 1830 and is similar to a paper found in Mrs. Gaskell's house. Layer 3 in the middle, that's the third one. That's an imitation marble panel, and that's been found a similar design to the hat shop in Tewkesbury. And then the flower and the bird from 1870 is a block printed paper, which is from around 1870. So interesting finds in these buildings. You never know what you're going to come across. And these really have been a gift that keeps giving. We think we've uncovered everything about these now, but who knows? So that's those two. So we're working on those two. And then the next one we're going to look at is the Dick Whittington. Obviously, again, a timber frame building that's had an early Georgian facade put onto the building. Facade is in quite poor condition. Bits of it fell off just before Christmas time. And we've had to have a cherry picker up there and rescue bits and check it over and see if there was anything else about to fall off. So what we're looking at here basically is some funding to restore that facade. Again, Andy Moir is doing dendrochronology on the timbers here. We haven't had the results back of that yet. So it's basically trying to make sure that that Georgian facade is attached properly to the building, and also to see if the new tenants would be interested in converting two rooms that are on the upper floors at the front of the building back into one. It was originally one large function room, and it's been split at some point into two. So we're hoping that we'd be able to persuade them to put it back into one large function room, and that they'd be able to use that for sort of private upstairs dining or parties or whatever. We're also looking at working with Meek Shoes. They've got a pre-application in with Historic England to convert the upper floors of this building here into flats, and also to alter the shop front. Shop fronts are a difficult one. I'll come on to shop fronts in a moment, but that shop front doesn't really sit well with the architectural style of the building. Nothing is going to be done with this, obviously the amazing plaster ceiling that's in the back of there. And I'm sure most of you will have been into Meeks and been up and had a look at this ceiling, which is incredible. It was restored I think back in the early 2000s, but has a little bit of damage to it. So we'll get that repaired. But essentially this scheme is to get those upper floors into use. At the moment, they're just used for storage or they're just vacant. So it'd be nice to see those lived in and to see a much more appropriate shop front put back onto that building. And that's the layout that's come in. So you can see it works very well, and we're working with the sort of layout of the building and not messing about with it too much because of its historic nature. So these are our targets. These are things that we don't know whether we'll be able to do at the moment, but we very much hope, fingers crossed, that we will. 30 Westgate Street is a timber frame building. You may not know that looking at it, but the clue is in the fact that there is a bit of a jetty there at the sort of ground floor level. And there's a photograph there on the right-hand side that is in our folder. And I believe we've had some assistance digging this out from certain members of the Civic Trust to show what one of the supporting brackets for the jetties would have been. It was found when they were looking at the building back in 1977, when there was a proposal to demolish it, which fortunately didn't happen. But unfortunately, it has been messed about with quite a lot inside. You can see one of the original timber framing parts of the walls there, but it has, sadly, the front of it is completely new, apart from the very top floor. What we would like to do is, looking at this document, this is the report that was done by a chap called F.W. Charles. He did a report all about what the timber framing might have looked like. He had the photograph of the jetty. So you can see he's comparing it with number 26 there and giving it dates. So he's saying he thinks it's around 1680, the building. What we would like, if the owner would work with us, is to put the jetties back, not the timber framing. So you wouldn't see, it would be like the cafe at the bottom end of town. So it would be rendered over, but you would see the jetties put back. So you'd see those steps put back. If we were allowed to do that, it would be amazing, and it would really show the building off to its best advantage. Pound stretcher, we hope to work with the owner here. There is interest, I know the owner is interested in selling at the moment, so it might be that we won't be able to fit this in within our time frame. But the very least we would like to do is to try and persuade them to work on the Westgate side of the building, the part that fronts onto Westgate, and perhaps change the huge retail unit that's there into a much smaller one. So make it less deep and perhaps make it into 3 smaller retail units. And they might fill in the gap above to the right there that you can see where the theatre entrance used to be, or the cinema entrance used to be. You can see from the photograph on the right, you can see the building I've just been talking about with Godsall and Sons written on the front. That's the building I've just been talking about. And then next to it here, you can see what was the entrance to the theatre in one of the photographs there. So there was a building in that gap that has been demolished at some point. So it's possible to put something back into that gap site there. So that's something we would hope to, because that's obviously quite a big unit, and that being vacant and being in poor condition really does let the street down. Obviously, we're talking to Dowdeswell about the fleece. They're looking at doing works to that. So within the time frame of High Street Heritage Action Zone, we're hoping that we'll be able to do some works to these 3 shop buildings and the areas above them, sort of put them back sort of more perhaps how they used to be, how they were originally, rather than the faux facade that's on there now. And that'll be the first phase of work, because obviously the fleece is a huge project. We wouldn't be able to fund all of that. We'll be able to fund a small part of it, and hopefully it will be these 3. 26 Westgate Street. This is one that Historic England are very keen for us to do, and it's just basically, because the building is so significant, is to get it into good condition, and that basically is some repairs to the roof, and then hopefully to get some more use into those upper floors. It is in use, but to get even more use into there if possible. And then obviously the Folk and Bishop Cooper's Lodging. There's funding there at the moment to look at a feasibility to perhaps repurpose Bishop Cooper's Lodging. And then once we know what's happening with that, then there is potential to do some works through Hazaz in terms of conversion. We can't match fund Architectural Heritage Fund, but we can work alongside them, and obviously if they fund a section and have match, we could fund a section with a match. So that's how that would work. So as I mentioned, there's the issue of shop fronts. So we would have grants for smaller improvements, which would be looking to reinstate some traditional shop fronts and reinstate traditional windows. And that would all be based on historical evidence or using examples that we think, that exists elsewhere that we think would be appropriate. This is all part of sort of assessing the area. So what we're hoping to do is to we have conservation area management plans, and those sort of set out what's allowed and what's not allowed and what's good and what's not good within the conservation areas. We hope to appraise those conservation area management plans and get a new version of it. So we'll assess what's good and what's bad within the conservation area, and then hopefully put some more guidance in place for people around fascia signage so that we don't get horrible signage going on the front of these beautiful historic buildings in the future. It'll be a long sort of process, but having said that, some of the smaller works to put new shop fronts on will be easy enough to do within the scheme. So the street scene is the other part of physical interventions. So it doesn't look too bad in these photographs, does it really? There's the sort of block paving in the centre of the street that ideally we'd like to replace with something else. Obviously the paving itself and some of the paving is quite good. The paving on the edges is fine. And as you can see in the photograph on the right there, there's the darker paving which delineates where the buildings used to stand in the middle of the street in times gone by. We'd like to do more with that and bring that more to life, really. At the moment, we don't have any match funding for that part of the project, unfortunately. We've got 350,000 from Historic England, and we need to find some funding to match it in order to be able to do it. So as I said, we'd like to maybe replace those brick sets with some coloured tarmac, put some better seating in, planted lighting, street furniture generally, perhaps making areas that are sort of, almost like outdoor rooms so that you can sit and have your lunch, or we can do events there to make them all sort of pleasant and somewhere where you want to sit down and stay for a while. We can bring in that interpretive element, so we can reference the Westgate stories, Tale of Gloucester, Dick Whittington Civil War, all of those kind of things, Jemmy Wood, the lost buildings that I talked about, and we can mark those side lanes and interpret the mosaics that are there within the floor. I'm just checking on time. How am I doing for time, Sue? All right.
Just gone 8, so you're okay.
Fab. Improvements to the street scene, we'd love to do a project involving young people. So ideally we'd be looking at making some stone seating or some stone planters that they could get involved with carving or building, or even if we end up just repairing the brick sets that are there, that they can get involved with that. So we'd really like to involve the young people in that. If they are involved with it, they'll take pride in it and they'll look after it in future generations. We did that in the picture you can see here is some young people working with our stonemason at St Mary de Crypt as part of Southgate Street THI. So we've done it before, we've got a good model there that we can follow, and we'd like to do that kind of thing again. So moving on to community engagement, consultation and raising awareness is the main part of that. You've been seeing all through this presentation, we've got an amazing logo. We went out to get some branding done, and we've come up with an amazing logo, which I hope you all like, very colourful and bright. We think it sort of shows Westgate Street buildings off to their best, and hopefully will entice people in. We've got a strap line, which is colourful past, bright future, which we hope explains what the project's about. It's a rich heritage, but with exciting plans for the future. We've got a grants leaflet, we've got a toolkit, which means that anything and everything we do from now on is going to be branded in this style, including our events, banners and stuff like that. Some of these people may have seen if they came to our launch event back in September. We've got, if we do manage to get out of COVID and we manage to go out and see people, we'll be taking these with us and putting them up in various places and doing exhibitions and talks and outreach work, and these will go with us everywhere we go. We've also produced some exhibition panels based on Andrew Armstrong's talk that he did as part of our launch, all about the history of Westgate Street. They're available as well to move around and for people to see in various locations. once we're able to do so. We're about to do a website. We've actually just had quotes back this week for our website, and we're hoping it'll be up and running by the end of January. So once it's done, we'll let you know the domain name and people can come and have a look at it. We've also done a questionnaire, an initial questionnaire, which we did during our launch event and over the following the following couple of weeks back in September. And we asked people, why do you visit Westgate? What do you visit Westgate for? And also, what 3 words would you use to describe Westgate Street? So people are visiting to see the cathedral mainly. Cathedral came out as the biggest bit, so we've obviously got the name right. It's the Cathedral Quarter. People are going there to see people, to see particular businesses or particular venues. So the Fountain Inn has come up there. They like to see the history there. And because we did this survey during our 3D art event, they're mentioning the 3D artwork there as well. What 3 words would you use to describe? So this is how it came out. It's obviously historical and it's obviously interesting. That's the main thing that people are saying. But they're also saying that it's tired, it's shabby, it's run down, it's lots of empty shops, it's neglected. So this is what we need to tackle as part of the project. So the proposed engagement that we're going to be doing is more consultation around these street scene improvements and around the interpretive elements. We're going to be doing some activities to make conservation issues more interesting for people and to make sure people understand them more. We'd like to do some training and some workshops for property owners and professionals, and I think we'll be partnering up with the Civic Trust very much to deliver some of those. And we'd like to do some educational resources. Again, we did some of these for Southgate Street, which have been very well received by schools, and Civic Trust were partners in that educational resource project, and we'd like to do that again with Westgate Street. And there is a lot of overlapping and interlinking between the engagement activities and the cultural programme. It is a bit confusing, but they are funded separately. That's basically the only difference. So as part of the educational things, we'll be doing an architecture trail, getting people to look at little features on the buildings and try and work out where they are, try and run them down the street and see if they can see them. This is something we did for the Southgate pack and it worked very well. I've got all the answers to these if you would like them afterwards. I'm sure most of you know most of them anyway. And then we're going to be doing some work with old photographs. Unfortunately, the archives have been shut for most of the time that we haven't managed to get in there really to do much work, looking through old photographs and old plans and what have you, but we will be doing that as soon as we possibly can. And using that as part of our educational resources, perhaps getting children to stand in the position that this picture was taken and have a look at how the buildings have changed and what's changed, what's the same, to see how things have moved over time. We're also planning, very much in partnership, to do a reminiscence project. So we'd like to work with the archives, the folk. I'm sorry, Sue, I've put museum in there and it's not, it's just, and the City Museum, to sort of do a kind of a drop-in session so that people can come in and tell us a little bit of a story about what they remember about Westgate Street. Maybe they have some photographs or plans or some kind of documents, a pamphlet from somewhere that they'd like to sort of offer up to the project so that we can scan and we can share then on our website. And then we'll put together little exhibitions and publications and short films that will sort of pass that information on so that everyone can see it. Hopefully it's a way that people can really engage with the project. Certainly the Fleece have announced recently they'll be doing a reminiscence project, and I know there are a couple of other people doing reminiscence projects at the moment, so I'm hoping we can all join forces and it'll be a really nice way of being able to do something. If we can't have the drop-in sessions, we might even be able to get people to just email things to us and we can then put them on the website for other people to see. So hopefully that will be launched this month and we'll be able to get cracking on that. We're hoping to do some community archaeology at the rear of the Fleece. We're relying on National Lottery Heritage funding for that, and they have closed or had been closed until recently, and their new criteria are not necessarily supportive of community archaeology, unfortunately, but we will keep persevering. It'd be really nice to get people working on an actual dig at the back of the Fleece complex there. We know that there are some remains of some medieval buildings there, and it'd be really lovely to uncover them and get people involved in that to really sort of strike home the message that it's a really historic city. So the cultural programme, which is separately funded, as I said, through the National Lottery Heritage Fund and the Arts Council, we've just applied for this funding. It had to be in December, and we were here at the end of January. Basically, this is the thrust of really where people can get involved. It's basically to engage communities and to celebrate the importance of these historic areas as community hubs. What we're planning to do is to have one national and one local artist in residence in a Westgate venue from September 2021, and a community producer recruited from a local audience, and they'll be working with the artist for 2 years. And then we hope to sort of actively engage 40 plus people in creating events themselves. So really sort of ground up stuff, and trying to get people to put their own sort of events and activities on with support from the community producer and the artist in residence. We'll do 3 locally produced events each year in Westgate. We'll have an annual open studios with the artist in residence. We'll try and do a Westgate focus as part of some of the bigger events that are already happening, like the Tall Ships and the 3 Choirs. And we'll do some First Friday events, which will engage young people in the arts. So first Friday of the month, that's when we'll do something specifically aimed at young people. So we'll be doing something as part of the History Festival with this as well. We'll try and employ 5 more artists over the period to sort of work on Westgate commissions, performances and exhibitions. And we hope to represent the 3D art exhibition that we did back in September as a lead up to the community archaeology in partnership with the Museum of Gloucester. So you may remember our pilot project, which was the launch of our scheme, the official launch of our scheme back in September. That was interactive archaeology. We had the chance to apply for a separate pot of money as a pilot scheme, which enabled us to do, the lovely Andrew Armstrong here did his annual talk for the History Festival about Westgate Street, a street through time, which was very well received, and really helped us as well as a team, as a heritage team, in terms of getting all that information that we needed about the history of the street and how the street has developed through time. And we've got that now in our exhibition and in Andy's talk to use over the period of the project. We also applied, well, this was actually my idea, and I'm very proud of this. We knew that there were these buildings under the street, and we knew that that they were marked with the different coloured paving, as I talked about. But I thought, wouldn't it be fab if you could actually look down into the ground and see these? So I looked online and found an artist that could do it, and then I just got very excited and thought, okay, let's do it. And then this pilot money came up that we could apply for. So I got quotes in from this artist and a couple of others, and it was doable. Fortunately, COVID had meant the artist didn't have a lot of work on and was really, really keen to work with us. Gave us a really good price for working in Gloucester. And he was so pleased with the results, particularly the community engagement side of things. But we have the Roman baths here, which is at the top of Westgate Street, the columns that have been found there that were slightly off, a bit of artistic license here, it was slightly off where it is actually shown on the ground here. But it really did get people coming into the city, looking at these and asking us, was that really there? Is this really part of Gloucester's heritage? And we were able to tell them all about them. So it was a fantastic event. And as I said earlier, we're hoping to roll these out again. We did have the jokey ones as well, in terms of the Tale of Gloucester steps and the monks taking their beer through the tunnel to the cathedral, or vice versa. We know that didn't happen, but it was just a bit of a jokey one outside the Fleece. And Joe Hill, the artist who was working on these, he worked on that over the weekend that we had the event here for. I'm just coming up to the end now, so you'll be pleased to know.
That's fine.
This was the social media response that we had to it. This was what we hadn't really banked on. It went absolutely viral, this. We had posts from everyone everywhere, and we actually got the photograph of the baths there into the Telegraph, which was amazing. So it really did put Gloucester on the map, and I'm really hopeful that when we run it again, we'll get even more people coming along to see it. It is a very staff intensive thing. There is a little video of it which you can see on the History Festival website, and you'll see us all sort of running around sticking tape underneath them because they're done on canvas and then stuck to the floor. So very time consuming to put down and take away. And obviously you can't leave them unattended, so quite staff intensive in terms of staff having to be with them all the time. But I think it was well worth it, and really pleased with, as I say, with how it came out. So here's a little snippet of Joe Hill from Joe and Max talking about his artwork and his time in Gloucester.
Hi, I'm Joe Hill. I'm a 3D street artist from 3D Joe and Max, and I'm in Gloucester painting some 3D illusions to celebrate all the amazing historic archaeological sites beneath our feet. It's a really fun way to get people outdoors, interacting with the artwork. It's a very inclusive form of art where anyone can walk along the street and discover something that hopefully will bring them a little bit of a joy, and also discover a little bit more about the history of Gloucester. At the moment we've got lots of people interacting with the pieces, coming up with poses. The 3D artworks are designed so that people will be a part of the picture. The picture isn't finished until someone is in it. So we're encouraging people to come up with some crazy poses and interact with the artworks. And already we've got some poses we hadn't anticipated, which is great. People are being really creative and seem to be having a lot of fun.
There we go. So that's where I'm finishing. As I said, it's quite a varied project, trying to tackle some quite serious and difficult issues, but also bring a bit of joy, fun, cultural, artistic engagement to the heritage of Westgate Street. So thank you very much.
That was really, very, very interesting, and so interesting, particularly for us in the Civic Trust, because we could see that some more work is going to be done on the Dick Whittington. That was one of our original projects. Phil Moss, who is with us this evening, I think did some of the graphics that you've got on some of your illustrative things.
That's right. Thank you, Phil.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. Now I've got a first question here is from Susan Hamilton. And she's saying about the occupation of upper floors has to depend on there being direct access from the street at ground level or the rear access. And do you know what proportion of the buildings in Westgate Street have this?
Good question. We know that some of them do have access to the rear and some via side lanes. Some of them don't, though. You are quite right. At the moment, for example, number 41 doesn't have any rear access. So that's something we're going to have to look at and try and negotiate access across existing sort of rear entrances. Or we'll be looking to allow people to change the frontage of their buildings to sort of add in an additional doorway. That's been done in other places. If it's wide enough, it's possible to do that, reduce the shop front and put a staircase in and a separate entranceway. We're hoping, as part of the guidance that we produce, that we'll be looking at that in a bit more detail. So it will be guidance for people who own these kinds of properties, looking at how they can convert the upper floors and get access to them and do it in a way that is sympathetic with a listed building. It's not always going to be possible. We have to accept that, but where it is possible, we're going to support that as much as we possibly can. Okay,
could I ask you to stop sharing your screen at the moment so that
yeah,
you can see everybody? Is that okay?
Stop share, yeah.
Yeah, so that's lovely. Thank you very much. Right, the next question is from Rosie and Bruce Clifford. Maybe holiday flats in historic buildings, as in Chester. That's always a possibility, I suppose. And they're also asking, are Decrypt involved as stakeholders? And they would like to see some green space included. Are there any plans for any tree planting or anything like that?
That's something we would look at as part of the public realm part of the scheme, definitely looking at tree planting, not necessarily in the street, but maybe in planters or in sort of designated areas where the roots can't do any damage to things. But yeah, it's green spaces are something that the city has a lack of, unfortunately. The work that's been done in Cathedral green has been really well received. So we'd look to sort of move that kind of style, not necessarily the same, but move, you know, whatever's appropriate for Westgate Street out into Westgate Street, and sort of follow that kind of pattern of having some planting, some seating, interpreting the stories. That's what we're aiming to do. Decrypt are not a partner because they're out of the zone, but that doesn't mean that we can't work with them. They could certainly be a stakeholder, and we've worked with them, as I said, in Southgate Street. We're working with the diocese generally. Obviously the Cathedral are involved, St Nicholas Church were within the zone. Unfortunately, we can't fund them directly, but we're working with them on potential cultural programme activities and that kind of thing.
Okay, I think that's fine. Mark Horrell has got an idea. He's saying, could you copy the National Trust and get people to pay for working holidays to do some archaeology rather than having to rely on a grant if those are not available anymore, or the repair work, even archaeology and repair work?
That's something we can look at. Yeah, definitely. We'll find out about that and see if it's something that we can offer. Archaeology is, I'm hoping if we can do it, it will be very, very interesting for people, and we'll get a lot of people signing up for it. So it may well be that it's something that people have to pay for, or that, you know, we have a waiting list for, or, you know, that we can sort of try and direct those people to other bits of the project as well. So yeah, definitely.
It's just reminded me that Phil Moss, who is here this evening, I can't see him on the screen this side, but it might be on one of the other pages. That's how he started off his interest in art, by going on a dig. And I mean, I think that is a good way to encourage young people. So Nigel Sargent is saying, why does the council permit such tacky shop signs? There you are. They look awful. It seems like having anyone in the shop is better than no one. And he says he visited Stamford in November and it was gleaming and pristine. It felt to me like the council must be much tougher there on appearance. So I don't know if you've got any comment on that.
Funnily enough, it's something we were talking about today in the team. I mentioned that we'd be looking at the conservation area appraisals, and as part of that, we would be asking the consultants that we employ to look at bringing in some directives to stop people from putting horrendous signs on buildings. Signage is a problem we're aware of, but there isn't really any, we don't have any sort of legislation in place, if you like, as put through the planning side of things that can stop it really, unless it's an illuminated sign or unless it's considered advertising. What we can do is bring something in called an area of special control, which would mean that people have to apply. It takes away their right to, sort of permitted development right, if you like, to just put any signage on the front of their building. It would have to be approved or within follow a set of guidelines that we would produce. So it's something we're looking at. Yes, you're right, other areas are tougher than we are, or than we have been in the past, and it's something that we hope to sort of start in Westgate Street as part of this, that can sort of bleed out into other areas of the city.
Yes, I'd understood that the City Council certainly have been considering for some time having a sort of special design procedure. But as you say, that hasn't been in place for years and years, which is why probably all these things come unstuck a bit. David Champion, who's one of our members, I can see him here. David does street surveys from time to time and gets, you know, we sort of spot things that are going wrong a bit and brings them up with the City Council. But obviously this is all part of all this. No, the next question. What about St Nicholas? It is a large space for many people. This is from Paul Drinkwater. Now, Paul Drinkwater runs the Heritage Open Days, which happen in September as part of the History Festival. So Paul is obviously very keen to look at the old buildings. He says it's good acoustics for musical events and plenty of car parking nearby. So
yes. We're in touch with the Churches Conservation Trust, who own the building, and they are currently also working with Architectural Heritage Fund and have a feasibility study ongoing at the moment. But as part of the cultural programme, we would definitely like to see that in use for performances, for exhibitions, along with the folk. You know, there are a number of venues in the street that really could do more, and we should be doing more with. It's just a case of funding really, and also trying to sort of build that groundswell. The Dick Whittington is the new manager there, is hoping to do some musical, or bring in bands basically and have it as a music venue. And we think it would be an ideal partnership. St Nick's and the Dick Whittington, you know, you could go to a concert in the church and then go around to the pub afterwards and have some food, or, you know, there are ways of working together, I think, that could really bring these sites to life and really get them all engaging with each other.
Yeah, we've had similar conversations with the conservation people for the church, and we've had a similar conversation there about using their large spaces so they can use our toilets and our cafe. So
Yeah.
yes, a working partnership is a good idea. James Dillon has asked the question, do we know what the Fleece is going to become, and will the historic building be restored?
At the moment, the council have a partner that they are negotiating terms with. It's Dowdswell, and they are hoping to convert the building into a boutique hotel. And as I said, we are hoping that we will see a first phase of that happen within the life of this project, so that we can put some funding in their direction for those bits that front onto Westgate Street. But I think that the plan is that, yes, they will restore the building, getting it looking like its former glory. They are asking people for memories, photograph stories at the moment. It's a big project, and obviously it's going to take a huge amount of money. They need to bring quite a bit into play, and the council are negotiating those terms with them at the moment. But fingers crossed, we'll see something happening soon and within the life of this project.
And certainly Dowdswell have done similar projects in Cheltenham, which have been beautiful. They've restored things to a very high standard. So let's hope they do the same thing with the Fleece. Jean Morgan has got the question, Llandud no have an Alice in Wonderland trail. Gloucester could have a Beatrix Potter trail. There you are, there's a thought. We do Beatrix Potter walks. Within the Civic Trust, we have a variety of different types of tours that we promote, and there is one about Beatrix Potter, but certainly how does that appeal to you, the trail?
Yeah, I think we've certainly considered trails as part of our cultural programme and our community engagement programme. It would be something we would love to do, and having done the interactive archaeology with using the Taylor of Gloucester's little icon there, it's something that we would like to bring to life and really make more people aware of. If you look at the books, if you look at the original illustrations, they are beautiful, and they include the cathedral, they include a lot of Westgate buildings, and yeah, if we can raise more awareness of that and get those out to people, I think that would be a good outcome as well from all of this.
Right, at the moment, we haven't got anybody else asking a question, but I'll just say something to you. Earlier today, I invited Claire to come on one of our walks when we're able to again. And I've got an arrangement at the moment with Roger Peel, who's going to take Philip Walker, who is the head of culture, and Rebecca Clay, who is the new marketing manager for Gloucester. He's going to take them on a guided walk around Gloucester when we can, and Claire is going to come along as well, which I think will be a great opportunity to show off some of the things that maybe they don't know about yet. And we always have a say. I'm a tour guide myself, and one of our sayings is look up and look down, because there's so much to miss if you don't do those two things. I can't see anybody else asking a question at the moment. So what I'm going to say to people now is, if you would like to unmute yourselves, because obviously it would be very nice to show Claire our appreciation. I would also like to say thank you very much to Gareth for hosting this meeting. And very, very kind of you to come along, Claire, and share your experiences and tell us all about the project. And I'm sure, well, I know we want to be very much involved with it. And I'm sure our members would be delighted to help with the Reminiscence project, which again, we're being involved with that as well. So everybody would like to show appreciation for Claire this evening, and thank you very much for coming along. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I hope to come back again and tell you more next time.
That would be lovely to show us how you're getting on.
More wallpaper.
More wallpaper. That would be great fun. And yes, if there's a quiz as well, we'll have to work out how we can handle that.
Yeah.
But very, very interesting. and I'm so pleased that I thought of inviting
Microphones.
you because it's really we are getting to know such a lot about it. Thank you again. Good night, everybody. I hope you.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.